For the first part of this lab, I viewed the effects of overmixing and undermixing flour, and my two variations were bread flour and cake flour. My first muffin was my undermixed bread flour muffin, which was mixed with only 20 strokes. And undermixing flour reduces gluten production, and that is why it has a very flat, rough, uneven surface. And the inside had very big, like one big air cell at the very bottom, since there wasn't any gluten production, and very fine, dense crumbs, as you can see. Next was my properly mixed bread flour muffin with 45 strokes, and there wasn't any over or under production of gluten since it was properly mixed, and the top had a very smooth, even layer, and the inside, it had a lot of air cells, perfectly symmetrical air cells, with very sticky crumbs that were easy to chew but hard to tear and cut into. Next was my overmixed bread flour muffin with 90 strokes, and overmixing flour produces too much gluten, which is why there's this odd, smooth cone shape. And inside there were random air cells, a bit large, a bit small, different sizes due to the overproduction of gluten, and it had a very gummy, mushy texture, and it was a bit bland in taste. Moving on to my second variation of flour, my cake flour. This flour was undermixed with only 20 strokes, and again, undermixing flour produces a reduction in gluten production, and that's why the top was a bit rough and uneven, and the inside had a lot of air cells with a very sticky crumb, easy to chew but hard to cut into with my hands. Next is my properly mixed cake flour with 45 strokes. The top had a symmetrical surface with even rise compared to the undermixed flour, and the interior had small air cells with fluffy and soft crumbs that were resistant to chew compared to the sticky, sort of mushy undermixed flour. Lastly, I have my overmixed cake flour with 90 strokes, and overmixing causes an overproduction of gluten, and that is why the top has a slight cone shape with a smooth surface, and the interior has random air cells of various sizes and coarse crumbs that are mushy. Also, because cake flour is delicate, that is why the cone shape isn't as protruding as the bread flour, which is more coarse and dense. For the second part of this lab, I test the effects of fat on muffins, and I have 3 oil variations, and I use bread flour. Oil is very important for the production of close-knit gluten structures, and without oil, you're going to have that very sticky dough, which is what I had when I was making it, and also oil is very important for the texture and flavor of bread, and that is why this one had a very gummy, chewy, dry texture and a very bland taste, and the interior had very dense, fine crumbs. So this variation of oil is 1.5 tablespoons. The surface was smooth with an even golden hue, and the interior had a couple air cells present, not too many. It was still kind of dense, but it was definitely softer and a lot fluffier and easier to chew than the no oil variation. And it was also kind of sweet compared to the previous no oil variation. My last variation is the 3 tablespoons of oil, and too much oil can actually cause a reduction or prevention of gluten development, and that is why this one turned out very mushy. There were little to no air cells present, and even when I opened it, you can see like it was very dense, no air cells, and that's because gluten development had been hindered by the excessive oil.